ICQ Podcast, episode 314, Low Band VHF. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah, or just a season to put your feet up and enjoy amateur radio. Welcome all our fellow hams to this 314th episode of the ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast. Supported this episode by Scott McDonald, Kilo Alpha 9 Papa, Richard Drexel, Kilo 4 Romeo Juliet Delta, and Bill Seward, Whiskey 4 Echo X-Ray Tango, and of course our monthly and subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB is joined by Chris, Mike 0, Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike 0, Sierra Golf Lima, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, Ed, DD5 Lima Papa, and Bill, November 3, Juliet India X-Ray, to discuss latest amateur ham radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the Newseum Brief, and this episode's feature is a feature on low band VHF. Well, as I say, at the end of the year and Christmas time, it's always great to see our friends and colleagues helping us out with our running costs, keep our show advert free and showing the value they find in the show. We'd like to thank our donors this episode. So Scott McDonald, Kilo Alpha 9 Papa, says, hey guys, thanks for a great year. Please keep up with the good work from Scott and Sarah, Kilo Alpha 9 Papa. Scott, thank you very much for your support throughout the year and also your friendship in the couple of times we've met up in the year. So it was very great to meet up with you, of course, along with all the other listeners we've met up with throughout the world this year. It's been great to catch up with you. But Bill Seward as well sent in a donation note, Whiskey 4 Echo X-Ray Tango. It says, greetings from the former KG4 Sierra Alpha Quebec. He's just dropped in his £1 a month annual donation into our donation box. Listening to the podcast was one of the motivators for him upgrading to the US Extra Class. Keep up your good ambassadorship for the hobby. Bill, we certainly will. And you may have heard we are intending on attending Dayton Hamvention again this year. So it'd be great to catch up with our American listeners again at that event. And of course, some of the UK guys that head over there. And Richard Drexel as well, Kilo 4 Romeo Juliet Delta. Don't have a message from you, Richard. Feel free to drop one over if you wish to, but again, your donation is greatly appreciated to the show. Now, I'd say, as the guys have done, if you enjoy the show, like to keep it advert free, and would like to show your value in keeping this advert free and paying our way, all you have to do is visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate, and I say, whatever you find value in the show, drop in the box there, and I say, keep us advert free and producing shows for you. Right, let's roll on with the last show of the year as we join Martin, Chris, Martin, Frank, Ed and Bill to discuss latest amateur radio news, including FT4 and JS8 added to the RFzero and ham radio to encourage students' interest in science. As always, guys, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to episode 314 of the ICQ podcast. And tonight, our news roundtable for this episode. Tonight I'm joined by Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH. Hi Chris.
Good evening, Martin.
Evening Chris, and good to have you with us. Mr. Martin Rothwell's here as well. You weren't here last time, so you didn't get me into trouble, did you, Martin?
I think I missed a few actually. Technical issues, other issues, Skype issues. I got a new computer in the end. It wouldn't take the update, so I was like, you know what? I'm going to go get a new computer. The old one's about 7 years old, so it was time for an upgrade. Yeah,
and we had to upgrade or fix the computer on the GB3 XP, didn't we?
Oh, yeah. Well, I thought it was the power supply that went. Turns out it was a CMOS battery that had died. But there's lots of videos about how to get round a dead CMOS battery, including people cutting things open and having wires you can short together. Like the answer is just replace the CMOS battery, but that's what it turned out to be, and it's working fine now. So
that's great news. Mine's call sign M0SGL, by the way. Moving across the pond, I have Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH. Hi, Frank.
Hey, Martin and guys. Good to be here this week.
Yeah, good to have you, mate. In Germany, we've got Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP.
Good evening, everybody.
Hi, Ed. And also back across the pond to Mr. Bill Barnes, N3JIX. Hi, Bill.
Good evening, everybody.
He's not here tonight.
Leslie's back.
I know.
Oh, we miss Leslie.
We do.
Leslie's okay. We'll get him out and about soon. But he needs to come out and do some of the events with us. It'll be good news.
Yeah, coffee or beer, Leslie? Tea. Oh, dear.
I guess half the listeners won't be understanding that reference, Martin, but we used to do another podcast called Coffee or Beer, where it was a group of guys discussing news stories just like you would down the pub. And it was very much tongue-in-cheek news stories, but good fun. So anyway, first news story, ham radio to encourage students' interest in science. And this is what it's all about, I think, in that the News Minute reports that Open Space Foundation uses amateur radio to encourage young people to take an interest in science. What do you think, Frank?
I'm very much for it. I'm for these things in general. In the U.S. in 1960, after the Russians launched the satellite Sputnik, being a kind of an enemy competitor to the United States, President Kennedy launched something called Project Talent, and it was a massive program to generate talent in science. And we don't have that, but we've covered on this podcast several stories that are in this same genre where we do things to create young people's increased interest in science. And hams have been at the forefront of a lot of those. So I see it in that perspective that wherever in the world that it's doing, when we do this, we're helping all of us. And so I think it's just terrific.
Yeah, it's good news on that one. I agree with you. Chris, you thoughts on this one? I know it's the other side of the pond, but...
Well, this is actually in India.
No, it isn't. India.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And it's really about, they've got, they're doing this program, and they're actually using a kind of space and astronomy lessons as well as amateur radio to teach science, which actually, so they've got kids, you're kind of giving kids a bit of inspiration. It's looking at the website now, they've got people drawing rockets and things on a blackboard. They've got people with telescopes there looking at stars and the space. And they're talking about amateur radio, and it talks about the fact that it's used in other countries, in America and Japan, and it's a great way to help in emergencies, that sort of thing. So I think it's just a part of using amateur radio is kind of a part of a wider program to try to encourage kids to get involved in science and space. So, science and engineering, that sort of thing. So I think it's actually another way to get young people involved. So I'm definitely all for that.
Yeah, same here. Martin, this sort of thing wasn't around when I left school. You're a bit younger than me. Would you have been happy with doing this?
Oh, I'd have been delighted. I seem to think there are a couple of people, there were some of the teachers at school that were involved in amateur radio to some extent. I remember a couple of kids in my class, their parents were into it. But hey, there's a lot of physics involved in radio. If it gets, it can be used as a tool to get people into science, great. But same way the other way around, if kids are going to these science lessons and get interested in radio, then to me that's an even better thing. So let's run with it. All for it.
Yeah, well, I think that when we've taught some youngsters amateur radio and they come along the amateur radio course, we've taught them things that they're going to learn in a couple of years in school eventually, and they get quite excited about it. Bill,
yeah, we've got a prop. You can actually learn it if you've got the prop and the product in front of you. A lot of people will have that to play with that they won't have, when they get to school, perhaps when they have to learn it a different way. So even better.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned teachers, actually. So I remember my physics teacher, I didn't know at the time, he was an amateur. And I never found out that until after he died, actually. I looked him up on the internet. But anyway, we used to talk about when he did his national service back in the probably 50s, 60s. And he did his with the ARRL Air Force. And he was a radio operator, and he used to have to do Morse code. And I've got a feeling that perhaps is where he got his interest in radio from. But I like to think that maybe he managed to, in a kind of indirect way, encourage me to get involved in the hobby, even though I didn't know as an amateur. Maybe he just kind of managed to subliminally pass that on to me, maybe.
It's a similar story with my physics teacher, actually. I wonder if it might have been the same one that sort of came down and moved to my school after yours, I don't know.
He probably retires. I'm not sure. That's unlikely. I don't know.
Maybe, but he's like, I'm sure they know you're describing the same guy. It's almost.
We'll exchange notes later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think if you've got a teacher that's passionate about things and science and that's good. And amateur radio is just an extension. What do you think, Bill?
Yes, it's definitely an extension. Nice thing in the article I saw is they set up this they were traveling to go meet the schools, and then they set up open science centers a few years later. And the thing that they came up with there I thought was really interesting. This is a quote from it. We make a point to meet students 2 to 3 times a week during non-working days. We selected 30 students based on interests with help from teachers to be trained in the Open Science Center. This comes back to something that Frank and I have run across multiple times in our careers, and that is, yes, it's important to give people experience. It's important people show stuff. But if you spend time with people, you actually invest the time, that's where you actually get your most bang for the buck. So you have to give a little to get a lot.
And this is focused on rural students. So if you take India as a country, which is, urbanized, I mean, their spikes in urbanization around their major cities are tremendous, but they have a tremendous population out in rural areas. And as Bill knows, we have that in the U.S., and you probably have that in the United Kingdom as well. But this program being focused there, these kids don't get as much as the urban center kids get in terms of technology. And so I suspect they've got a group who are kind of waiting with bated breath, if you will, on this kind of investment that Bill's talking about.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, if you've got people that are passionate about what they're teaching and, they want to impart knowledge, and I've come across quite a lot of young people in the hobby or when we've been running training courses, and they really, really, really want to know, because once you've kindled that knowledge, they want to suck your brains dry. What do you think, Ed?
Oh, there's not a lot I can add to what's already been said by everybody. Just underlining this particular article is about what's going on in India, and India, not the most wealthy country around, so a lot of stuff's probably been done on a shoestring, as we say. But good on them for doing it, and let's just see what come out of this that maybe could be used in other countries anyway. Amateur radio in India seems to be on an up at the moment, as in it doing more and more for the community and getting more publicity. So that's all good.
Yeah. Well, any publicity is good publicity in my book. Moving to our second news story, there's a board, an RFzero, small computer board, which has got RF components on it, and they've just released a new version that now does FT4 and JS8. I'm going to pass to Bill, because you're an FT8, FT4 type person, aren't you, Bill?
Yeah, I'm the digital guy. But yeah, this is the RFzero is a microcomputer that we talked about a while ago. It's available now. It's basically an Arduino compatible board with a built-in GPS and built-in RF deck. And so it has a regular GPS receiver available for it. It has a SI5351 RF chip, a whole bunch of other components to make that useful. And it's Arduino compatible with an Arduino Zero or Arduino M0. It's basically a board for experimenting, and it's dead cheap. I mean, what did I look it up here? Yeah, it's right now the current conversion rate from good Danish crowns is like 57 pounds or $60 US to get this thing sent to you. And they updated the library, so now you can actually send FT4 free text or JS8 heartbeat messages. So JS8 is that program was originally came out. They took the code from FT8 and changed it so that it's a more free messages, so you can actually use it, and called it JS8 call. So you could actually send, have a QSO with somebody, just type in like you're working with PSK31 or something, longer messages, and it would just break them up into the proper, chunks and send them, out the radio. Well, this thing is now, you can build your own thing. So you can get this board, you can go in Arduino IDE, you can grab the new RFzero library, and you can build whatever you can imagine at this point for transmitting. You can also add a display to this board, and this is where I stopped reading because it got overwhelming. But you might be able to even program this thing for receive, it looks like. But basically, it's yet another platform with a very low entry point to getting into, and it has a lot of possibilities for experimentation. And I love it when people experiment. So if you're into programming Arduinos and you want to do something neat with RF, I think this is a good place to start and go have fun with it.
Yeah, well, I think it's great that our hobby isn't dead by a long chalk with all these new boards and all these new ideas and functions coming out. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, it's actually quite similar to what you can do today with the Raspberry Pi as well, with the appropriate hat. So it seems to be along the same lines. If it's Arduino, it's a microcontroller rather than a microprocessor, but the differences are effectively minimal because you're still running logic to do it. But yeah, looks like a good thing to work with. I'd like to see a decent-sized bandpass filter stuck on the output of anything coming out of this, though. But otherwise, yeah, good idea. A good luck to them. He said it's coming out of Denmark, which is interesting. Wonder how long before we hear the first of these on the air. They're probably already on the air.
Yeah, well, as I say, we all should put bandpass filters on or low-pass filters on our these experimental rigs. It's just as important, in fact, more important, because they're already fitted to commercial stuff. Frank, what's your thoughts on it?
I agree with what's been said. I think Bill gave a very good overview, and I agree with Ed. The thing I would add is that while you could probably put a hat on a Raspberry Pi that's got a SI5351 chip, this has it built in, and that's where I think Bill's comments about the platform for further development. It's got a 10 parts per million oscillator. It will do separate I and Q signals and things of that nature. And I won't repeat everything Bill said, but it gives you that platform that for all these books and other kind of things that have sketches already pre-programmed, it's like you're going to be a Picasso, but you don't have to do all the paint strokes yourself. You've got little bits and pieces you can put together. So it's already in Whisper. It's already into kind of new level of beacons and things like that. As I said when we covered this, when it was first announced, I had interacted with the proprietor who had put this there. So I'm very positive about this as a building platform.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Chris, your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think we've all said there's many devices out there that can do similar things. Obviously, if you look at our license, it's all about self-training in amateur, well, certainly in the UK, self-training in amateur radio. And part of that is around experimentation. When I think you were saying in Ireland, it's an amateur experimental license that you're given. So it's all about pushing the boundaries and learning stuff. And I think we're quite lucky to be alive at this time and that these things are out there. If you wanted to be able to do experimentation 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, that was involved a lot of construction, a lot of electronics, a lot of manual work. And now it's done in software. You go and buy one of these devices that are really dirt cheap, plug it into your computer you probably already got, and then it's all just down to you and coding stuff. So I think, to be alive now, and if this is the sort of thing you want to get involved with in development, I think now is a good time to be around and have the opportunity to do sort of thing. So I think actually quite exciting times if you're into experimentation.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I think Raspberry Pis, the Raspberry Pi Zero we got on the front of a magazine, giving away with a magazine for free one point.
That's true, yeah.
And let me add this on Ed's concern. I'm looking at the site, and there are quite a number of filters that you can get from them to put on this device as you need it. So just throw that in.
Yeah, so
but that's the hardware that isn't actually included in the device. But you need to order what you need for whatever
absolutely
you're building.
That was really my point.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah,
you don't have to have everything on the board and then have it overloaded and too expensive.
Well, as you say, you order the bits you need, and if it's something you're experimenting with, it's great. Martin, your thoughts on this one?
It's exciting. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not a coder. I can't program anything more than much than a I can see Bill waving his hands around the air. I can't program anything more than a hello world program. Maybe it could ask you your name and you could reply and say, hello, Martin, or whatever. But yeah, I'm curious to know more about this thing. FT8 and JS8, I'd like to know about it, but I'm not curious enough that I want to sit down and play with them. That's not my cup of tea. I forgot about the RFzero, but I love the idea of it, what it can do. I love the fact that you can build on it. Anything more that it can do, great, because at the end of the day, it's loads more for people to play with to keep that spark alive, while HF is particularly quiet by comparison. So if you've got something else to play with, and we talked about it before, whether you're playing with digital modes or anything else, it keeps your interest in amateur radio.
Hey, Martin.
Hello.
Everyone's a coder. They just don't know it yet.
I can do basic HTML.
See, you're 90% there.
Yeah, but I can't do this Python and C and things like that. My wife can program better than I can.
Well, I'm not good at programming. I'm a fixer. I always say to people, I can you give me a piece of code that doesn't work, and I'll fiddle with it until it does work.
Yeah.
But if you say to me, Martin, sit down and write something from scratch, I'll look at you blank. So I kind of don't know.
Do that to some extent. We use like the DSP equipment at work, and you're sitting and playing in the background. I can change numbers and things to make it do different things. Like, no, I can sort of get, but if you want me to write it from scratch, absolutely forget it. But I will quote a T-shirt that I have that I stand by. Nothing is impossible with the right attitude and a hammer. I'll leave it at
Fine. Okay, moving on to our next news story. African Parts on the Air program. And I think this is great because if the African Parts on the Air program is kind of a spin-off, or it's in the same vein as the Parts on the Air that you guys in the States had, it's going to run for a year. And I think it's another thing that's starting to happen. Chris, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, why not? I think it's a good one. So it's I think this lasts for the whole year, doesn't it? I think this starts in January, ends in December 2020. So there's plenty of time to get involved. And South Africa's a massive country, and it's got huge reserves. And I think it's a great way to get people involved in amateur radio. So a bit like national parks on the air in the States, award programs in other parts of the world. So yeah, I mean, why not do something similar there and get people out and about, and people like wonder what people are up to. It's a good way for. I think there's lots of benefits to operating out in the field, and one of them is that people wonder what you're doing and talk to you, and we get to spread the word, I suppose. So yeah, this is a good one.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good one because giving somebody a purpose to do something is it'll more likely happen rather than, well, I think we might do this. Obviously, it might not happen. So, Ed, what's your thoughts?
Well, at the moment, I was actually trying to read through to try and find out from the link that's given whether this is a SARL-sponsored action or whether it's run as actually part of the worldwide parks on the air. Unfortunately, the link doesn't take me to anywhere near the article, so it just takes you to the home page.
I'm pretty sure it is part of the South African Radio League. I'm pretty sure they're
actually so that as was said before, it's a copy of what the US did, and then Canada did the following year or a couple of years later. Yeah, great on them. Good on them. There's quite a bit of activity. So QRP portable, because in South Africa, because I believe that's where the radar sport started as well. That's one where you actually go and activate a spot or operate from a spot and then take the equipment down quickly. So rapid deployment, go to another one, 3 miles further and call again and so on.
Radar, I thought, radar sport, are you trying to set off police speed traps or something? I completely misunderstood.
No, it's rapid deployment, and they've called it radar for whatever reason.
Is that some work Eddie Layton has been involved in?
And that started in South Africa. So the fact that there's some activity in the parks there makes a lot of sense.
I think Eddie Layton is someone in South Africa who has been very involved in that. Does that name ring a bell with radar?
Honestly, it doesn't, but that doesn't mean it's not right.
he and I are friends. We co-administer a Facebook group for the Zygu class of radios, and he and I have gotten to know one another through that venue, and he's very much involved, in radar. But I totally agree with what you're saying, Ed. There's a whole lot of portable ops, QRP stuff in South Africa, and I think this is just a terrific thing. I'm going out of turn, Martin.
No, you're not, Frank, because, I was going to bring you next anyway, and it's good that what you said. I agree with you.
And I agree with you that when we create opportunities to get on the air, it sometimes prompts many of us to actually get on the air rather than do something else. And that's one of the things that when I talk to contesters, many of them will reflect, well, I wasn't that interested in contesting, but, it was something that comes along regularly, and it kind of got me on the air. So I think that's in the same vein. It's good to have these organizations, and, we can kind of jump the pond on occasion with the right propagation from the states, and I think that's good.
Yeah, when you say get on the air, I got this vision of Dan keeps saying to me, get on the air. Don't say get on the air. So that's good. Martin,
we're going to have to get Dan a whip that's got get on the air branded into it. So
or the t-shirt. So, Martin, what's your thoughts?
Well, more stations to work, more excuses to get on the air. We said before, yes, this sort of thing is fun. It's out promoting radio, but I do wonder how many people struggle to get on the air in a park when people are constantly coming up and you're having to sort of take your radio hat off and put your public relations hat on. That's the thing that worries me. You go out there, you set all this stuff up, and you don't get a chance to play with it. So many people.
Well, I think the difference here is these parks are not like your local park with the swings. These are parks that are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of miles across.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Your most likely company is a snake or an animal.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Hey, Frank, that gentleman you talked about, you said might be involved. It was actually believed by ZS6BNE, from what I can see now. Eddie Layton,
that's the
that
guy.
Would be him, would it?
Yeah.
ZS6BNE, yeah. He's apparently been nominated for an award with the ARRL because of his work setting up radar.
Yes.
So it's definitely that part of the world. A lot of portable ops going on.
Yeah, well, good on Eddie, and he's hey, if I could vote, I can't, but if I could vote, I'd certainly vote for him. He's a very active and promoting ham in South Africa. I think a lot of him.
Yeah,
it's been nominated by Dr. Gary Immelman, ZS6YI, to get into the SARL's Hall of Fame. So that's quite something.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot goes on in South Africa. Bill, I know you try and chase the DX. This going to be a good opportunity for you?
I hope so. It's a good idea to do special events when you can with your national society, and this is the one that they've chosen for, looks like 2020. And it's a good one. South African Parks in the Air will run from the 1st of January to the 31st of December 2020, with various awards for activators and chasers. The rules are very similar to the other Parks in the Air. You got to make 10 QSO. 10 QSOs for your activity that count, but the QSOs can be made over a number of days, which helps with the camping. They need proof of your activity, which is a little different than some of the other programs. Some of the other ones are okay. GPS device, photograph, park signs, setup. Well, most of us that, do any kind of, remote activation want to brag on social media, so we're taking pictures anyway. And yes, Eddie Zulu Sierra 6 Bravo November Echo is the guy from that, at least has some major things to do with the radar challenge. And I think that's completely separate from the Parks on the Air thing, but the radar challenge is not easy, especially when the bands are not cooperating. So it's, I hope the folks that do the Parks on the Air thing plan accordingly, because we're at solar minimum. At least that's what I'm calling it at this point. Welcome to solar minimum.
Yeah, well, it's supposed to be getting better, Bill, so let's hope in 2020 it will and improve. So, we all agree that's a good one. Ed, you put the next article in. It came up overnight, so I think I'm going to let you run first with it. Barbara Ranson, who's a silent key, a former AAØI, her son now holds the call sign, So, some very interesting story, isn't it, Ed?
Yeah, and reference to references due. I got this story from qrz.com, so thanks for the guys, and thanks for the gentleman that put that up there, and I've got his name here somewhere, but John, W0PV, posted this story. He took it from a local newspaper. Barbara Ranson was a teacher and also an amateur radio operator, and spent part of her time teaching education related to STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and maths, including amateur radio. She was one of the first to actually start teaching amateur radio as part of the schoolwork, so to speak. In her later years, she was quite ill, but she loved going to the local library, and the library actually looked after her. She had her own little corner where they made sure she was okay and everything. And as a thank you for that, her family actually has given some money to the library, and also a rather nice memorial sign signifying science and technology, and also reflecting in memory of this woman who gave her heart to teaching young people in technology. And this sort of echoes what we had earlier on, that this is an area where slowly the educators are starting to look. We need more people getting into technology rather than the arts, because we need that to support future technology. But by all accounts, a lovely lady, and very much remembered in her community.
Yeah. And as I say, it sounds like she's one of the people that, or the type of person that I'm quite pleased to talk about, because it sounds like she was passionate and putting back in. I had the pleasure this morning of chatting to a lady who's a teacher in quite senior years now, and she was saying, we were talking about it, and there are teachers that are passionate about subjects, and there are teachers that are just marking their time because it's a job and they don't really care anymore. But when you find somebody that really cares, that will improve. Bill, what's your thoughts on this one?
I love this story. I spend most of my day at work. I actually work in a library at a college and university, and I understand the inner workings of how collection development works through implementation of processes a decade ago, 2 decades ago, actually. Well, time goes way too fast, guys. And I can tell you, when people donate money to a library and their criteria is kind of loose, that's like a godsend for a collection developments librarian, because they always have to make hard choices based on the money they have available as to what to get versus what not to get. And when stuff comes in, and in this case, they said, we want you to honor Barb by trying to do something to empower young women in math and science. I bet you that librarian that worked on that project was happy, because that gave them a focus, but at the same time, it gave them a spot to improve the collection so that everybody enjoys the library better. Another thing they had in the article that I really liked was Barb's legacy also helped start the library's 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten program, which promotes pre-literacy skills that help children become successful readers. Personally, I don't consider myself fathered a year by any metric that anyone uses, but that's one of the few things I did force the kids to do was read. Read to them, had them read to me now that they're in school, they're reading to me. It makes a world of difference. And the fact that her gift to the library is helping start that out is just amazingly wonderful. This whole article that Ed shared is just makes me feel great, because Frank knows this because of where he's located, and I know this too. If it wasn't for our local libraries, we would be in a desolate area of nothingness. but our libraries help people of all ages get access to materials that they would not have any other access to, and experiences. So, I don't want to get all preachy here on estate planning, but I can tell you, as my wife and I have been talking about, what are we going to do? Well, this is one of the things that came up is helping out the local library after we're gone. I think this is a great idea and a great topic and a great possibility here, and it just helps everyone for the future. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And before I bring Frank in, all I was going to say is, when you have a library, you have books in a library, and the books have been edited and checked. It's all very well saying the internet, and it's a lovely and great thing, the internet, for looking up. But if you put rubbish in, you get rubbish out on the internet. And you could say that, I don't know, the world's flat, or the sun has got a big light switch on it. Somebody would believe you. You can write any rubbish you like and somebody will believe you. At least with a library, they have books that have been edited and, for the most part, checked. I know certain errors come through, but they are. And Frank, you're an author as well, so I'll pass it to you for your thoughts.
Well, I can just completely echo what Bill had to say, and I want to thank Ed for bringing this to our attention. We could spend, and Bill and I feel confident to spend another hour talking about the virtue of libraries. The fact that this is libraries in connection with amateur radio is something that's sorely needed. I've certainly preached to Howard Mickle and others at ARRL that is something that section managers and ARRL need to focus on, is library programs. I will say this briefly. The name Andrew Carnegie may mean something to you across the pond. He was one of the multimillionaires back when there weren't that many in the U.S., had a tremendous estate. Single-handedly, the Carnegie Library Program put public libraries in the hinterlands in the U.S., and there, I dare say, and Bill, would be interested to get your comment, there are places that probably would never have built a public library on their own dime if that Carnegie Library Program didn't get it started to begin with. Now, the second thing, Martin, you are absolutely correct. In university libraries, you tend to have faculty who drive a lot of the book acquisitions, and departments and disciplines tend to have library reps. And part of what they do is make recommendations to libraries. And yet, university research libraries especially tend to have people who are library faculty, and they have faculty rank and tenure and things like that, because they become specialists in that area, Martin, like you were talking about, so rubbish doesn't kind of get in. And you'll have people, because they can get a tax benefit, want to dump a bunch of books that's garbage, and it might be worth the recycle for the paper, but they aren't really worth putting in a library. And if you didn't have those gatekeepers, you would have exactly what you're talking about. Librarians that I've known are kind of the salt of the earth, and who have helped me, who have helped others. And yeah, we've got a lot digital these days, but that meant their world changed dramatically. People like Bill helped many of them cope with that new world and that new horizon. And I'll end with this. There are rural libraries in the U.S. of where it's the only internet in town. And people drive up and park in the parking lot after hours and park in their car so their kids can get on the internet to do their homework. Some people may not believe that, but I've seen it with my own eyes. It's also an institution in many small rural communities, and they've got a satellite dish or some other feed that other monies have paid for. So, like Bill, this really touched my heart.
Yeah, very
Frank,
interesting.
I have also been witness to that this was now 20 years ago when I lived on Main Street in Montgomery, Pennsylvania. My apartment was directly across the street from the library, and people used to steal my parking spot to park in the car and do homework because the Wi-Fi went out the front window.
Yeah.
And that was 20 years ago. also following up, 2,509 Carnegie libraries were built. We're not one of them, but Penn State, the College of Communications, was one of them. Bucknell University down the road from me, their original Carnegie library is now their history department. But these other places I'm not familiar with. But just looking that up quick, I mean, the value of a library, I think, is dramatically understated this day and age, because everyone dismisses it as, oh, we'll just get on the internet. But you still need a place, you still need people, and you still need the stewardship, which is what Frank brought up about materials and stuff. And you need to make sure that it's available to everyone.
And I would just add that local clubs, especially, and then whatever the RSGB equivalent is for like the ARRL, they need to make sure libraries are on their radar for getting materials and programs there.
Yeah, I think you're right. It would be nice to see the communications handbook in the libraries. I'm sure it isn't, but the RSGB handbook, which is similar to your ARRL handbook. And
the ARRL handbook is collected every year at work. I can't imagine who put that in the system.
I think it should be, Bill. I mean, the ARRL handbook is such a glorious thing. I mean, I picked one up at the Cat's Bazaar the other month for £1. All right, it's the 2006 edition, but it's immaculate, and there's such good information in it. But anyway, I digress.
Bill and Martin, you've just motivated me. I'm going to buy. I just got my latest handbook. Just came in last week because they had a deal running on it. I'm going to buy another one. I'm going to get it in my local library. I make that personal commitment.
Thank you, Frank.
That's good, Frank. Well, I've got. I shouldn't know this, but I do. I have a 2020 ARRL handbook for Christmas and the 2020 antenna handbook for Christmas. So I'm looking forward to Christmas, but I've left Chris out in the cold here. What's your thoughts, Chris, on what we've been nattering about?
Well, I think it's been said. I think libraries and it's anyone can use a library. I think it's the amazing source of information. And like you were saying earlier, Martin, the internet's full of information, but how much of it do you trust? Wikipedia is great. So yeah, I think books are, compared to the internet, I think they both got their place. But I think books is something about books that they're reviewed, that they've got a quality about them that perhaps the internet doesn't always have. So no, I think this is a really, really good story. Interestingly, as a side note, I was just googling. In fact, I was looking on Wikipedia about Andrew Carnegie, and interestingly, he was a Scottish young man and emigrated as a child to the States, and his first job was as a telegrapher. So he's actually got a connection to radio.
Absolutely, hey, that's great.
Or potentially, actually, maybe not radio, maybe actually, maybe the telegram, but the wire telegraph service. But yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So all in all, a good story. Thanks, Ed, for putting that one forward. Frank, you put the next one forward. The ARRL is reshaping its podcast offerings for 2020. Maybe we ought to sort of think of updating somehow, but I think we got a reasonable format. But there's So What Now is disappearing. Their beginners podcast, and The Doctor Is In is being changed. Frank, tell us more about it.
Well, this one, I'm sad because I think The Doctor Is In with Steve Ford and Joel Hallis is, and I've said this in print, wrote a letter they published in ARRL. It's one of the best podcasts on the air. I like their style, I like their content, and so on. They have good chemistry. Now, Joel Hallis has had some health issues. He mentioned that, but I don't think that's the comeuppance for this. He will still write The Doctor Is In QST in print format. But what I do know is that this is part of the sort of the evolving program that Howard Mickle is leading. And he's talked about that in some of the feature interviews that I've done with here on the podcast. And they're segmenting new hams who often complain Well, I didn't join because I looked at that QS whatever magazine y'all published, and I couldn't understand anything past the front cover, and I didn't know mostly what was on the front cover. And while that's a stretch after passing exams, you probably do know, it was, hey, this is, I need something that's an entry point. So the On the Air magazine is their new alternative magazine that you can get, particularly if you're a new ham. If you don't want to get QS2, you can opt to get On the Air. It will be both print and digital. And along the way with that, they're kind of repositioning the So What Now, which was a podcast that's been going on, for about a year or so. It's going to sunset here next month, January 20th. And they're going to do a new podcast that will kind of be compatible with the new magazine. And I think is still some of that is to be determined. The old So What Now will be available as podcasts you can listen to. The Doctor Is In with Steve Ford and Joel Hallis will be replaced by a new podcast called Eclectic Tech, hosted by Steve Ford. I'm going to guess he's going to have a rotating number of individuals in who know something about specific topics, and that may get a little more variety, in that. So that's, what you might expect, with evolution and change, particularly with their mission to reach particularly new hams. And don't let those that get a technician license and or general get a license and don't get on the air. Do something that helps them get on the air. That's what I know about it.
Yeah. Well, that's, as I say, I can concur there's a lot of work, production work to produce a podcast, and you have to try and keep it fresh, and we try and keep ours fresh by having the 12 of us who are presenters. So we rotate the production team fairly regularly. So all in all, I think maybe now might be a good time for them to rotate, as you say, and ones that have run their course, fair enough if they drop off the bottom. Lots of podcasts do. Martin, what's your thoughts?
Well, I'll be honest. I mean, presumably, they're reshaping their podcast. They're taking some of them away. Presumably, that's either to do with either money or audience numbers. But with the greatest respect to the ARRL, I actually didn't know that they made podcasts. So rather than reshaping things, perhaps they should look at marketing, or their marketing there, outside of their membership, away from the usual places like their website, QST, that sort of thing. Build your audience worldwide. Build yourself a nice big worldwide audience, because you've got the backing there, you've got the product, you've got everything to sell. Then when you've got that audience, then think about promoting the additional services you offer as a member body for people in the US or whatever else. Because as I say, I had no idea. I've searched for amateur radio podcasts before. I've looked online. I've looked on my standard podcast catchers. Never once have I seen one come up from the ARRL. We get the usual suspects. We all know who they are. I'm not going to name check them, but we all know who they are. I've never seen the ARRL. So perhaps it's a marketing issue that they should have been addressing before they think about, well, we haven't got the audience, let's just pull it.
Do you remember Get Smart? They had the cone of silence. I think that's your point. They've kept their candle under a bush.
And I think that's the problem. They've got the budget to market them worldwide. Get in touch with the other member bodies, the RSGB, and people like that. Hey, can you help us market our products? It's a back scratching thing. We all want it for the good of the hobby. If everybody promotes everybody's things like that, then it's a win-win situation. Even if they came to people like ourselves, we're sitting here talking about this stuff. If they want to talk to us about their podcast, we're going to talk to them, aren't we? Someone needs to think outside the box here.
I think one of the problems, though, Martin, is that amateur radio community doesn't necessarily understand what a podcast is. Now, 11 and a half years into podcasting, I was at the Cat's Bazaar, had the table out, talking to people. There was still people coming by saying, what's a podcast? What's it all about? What do you mean it's free?
You see, that surprises me, because when you watch TV now and you listen to the radio, I mean, in the UK, our national publicly funded broadcast is making a massive fuss about podcasting at the moment.
They are. But
how do people not know nowadays?
Well, they kind of. I can't argue this, but there are still amateurs that are of a certain age that think a podcast is one episode only. There are still podcasters amateurs that just don't get it. Now, I'll give you, the States gets it better than the UK, in truthfulness, but I would guess proportionally you got the same problem. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, it's a shame to see that they're shutting this down. Once again, they have to make business sense on what they're spending and what they're getting out of it, and then that's kind of where I'm hanging up at. I do know that I read, people are going to be surprised. I read Dan's blog, kb6nu.com. He just posted something yesterday about the January QST. Howard Mickle put in stuff about some other changes they're going to do. So they're starting a new magazine on the air, and he's talking about special interest groups. So specifically listed radio, sport, experimenters, and emergency communications, about doing some kind of, I guess not really, maybe a magazine around each one of them. I guess that's kind of, or at least kind of line stuff with it. Well, depending on what they're doing, a companion podcast to match each one of these special interest groups might be a better organization. Maybe that's what they're thinking long run. I'm not sure. It's kind of early to tell, other than we just got the announcement that they're cutting these other podcasts off and kicking up one new one later. The other thing, that I know you guys can attest to as well is these things take a while to make. And maybe they were making, just doing these two podcasts as often as they was just too often, that maybe they need to do stuff like that. Not really sure, but it's an interesting announcement. Like I said, interesting QST. I didn't get my copy yet of January's QST, probably here this week or something like that. But at any rate, Dan's already talking about it, so I'm sure he has a ton of information in a couple weeks when you talk to him by then.
Yeah, well, I know how much effort it goes into making a podcast. Certainly doing it fortnightly. And Chris will tell you that I often refer to, I have very busy weeks and I have manic weeks. And recording is usually a manic week. But we do it out of enjoyment. I read a report some time ago that said at any one point in time there are 750,000 podcasts out there. Most of them don't make it past episode 7. So the fact that So Now What has made it to episode 16 and it didn't release its last episode on time, so we should have been having 2 episodes by now since the last one. I would wonder if that's now gone. But it is a massive amount of work, and in fairness, there's very few can make any money at it. Everybody thinks you can make money at it. Everybody thinks by selling advertising and one thing and another, but the advertiser wants a massive return on their sponsorship. And okay, I'll be brutally honest with you. The only thing, we're just about, after 11 and a half years, we're just about breaking even now. And if it wasn't for the goodwill of our presenters, we wouldn't have a podcast. And in fairness, some orange shirts and a jacket is about as much as I think any of us have had out of the podcast. Now, that's not on a financial basis. We have a lot of other non-tangibles that we thoroughly enjoy. But anyway, I'll shut up at that point. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, just to clarify what you just said as well, Martin, in case anybody gets the wrong idea. This podcast is not sponsored by commercial sponsors, only by very kind people giving their money to keep the podcast running. So individuals. So thank you to all of those in any case. replying to the other Martin's comment about advertising, I've actually listened to So Now What and The Doctor Is In from the very first edition of both of those all the way through. Now, I am a person that tends to listen to a lot of podcasts while taking the dog for the walk, but I think I got to know about them through the ARRL's weekly news broadcast, and I think you're right, Martin, that's probably the only place they've advertised them.
Okay, let me ask you another question. Where does that broadcast go out? Because I've never even heard that.
They're all the ARRL news one. They're all on iTunes, Blueberry.
Exactly. So I didn't even know that existed. So another classic example of you need to advertise outside of your own ecospace.
Exactly. I'm agreeing with what you're saying, and I think that's the problem they hit. They need to get it.
It's the cone of silence.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Within their own environment. I'm sure it's been advertised in the QST magazine as well. But again, it's people who already know within the group.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. There's an audio version of the Aries News e-letter.
Yeah, whatever, yeah. But anyway, and I actually quite like certainly The Doctor Is In, the format of it is actually quite a jolly, entertaining podcast. But in any case, I wonder if, I know it's pointed out that they're stopping both of those podcasts, but they are replacing it with one or two other ones. I'm not sure from this. You could read it either way. So maybe it's a matter of evolution rather than destruction of the podcasts. But I hope so.
If you kill off your podcast and your listeners go, okay, never mind, it's gone. They all delete it from their
catalog, whatever. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Then you bring another podcast out. But are they going to go and search for it again? If you've already got, I don't know, 1,000 subscribers, keep that and then rebrand it. Say, hey, by the way, we're rebranding as this in the new year. Whatever.
That would be a more sensible approach. I agree.
They would be smart to have a final feed notice that points you to the new podcast that you would normally kind of get if you do it that way.
Yeah.
Just a thought. I would say to RSGB and some of the other, I think Essex Hams is a group there in the UK, and doesn't RSGB have an audio news? I seem to listen to it frequently when I'm driving. I found out about that because I looked for it, Martin, and yet not everybody is someone who's a seeker. They sort of pick up on it once it's in their environment.
Yeah, sorry, Frank. If that's GB2RS that you're getting as a podcast, I actually published that.
Oh, well, good, very good.
I also published News West for the Western Australia group. But in any case, Martin, you're absolutely right. That it needs to be publicised somehow outside of just your own publications. Once you're into the ecosystem, fine. But, getting people in is the problem. And I absolutely agree. Shutting it down isn't the right thing to do. It's better to leave that channel open with some kind of short message put out each month saying, or each week saying, we are working on a new one, wait for the new one, so to speak. Another point I have on the new magazine, the On the Air magazine that the ARRL members are going to get. My understanding, again from the ARRL news podcast, is that the members have to actually now choose between On the Air and QST in paper format, but they can get them both in digital.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's one thing. And I'm guessing, unless somebody joins ARRL new, they'll be asked which do you want, or when it's a renewal of your subscription. Otherwise, it'll just run to the end with whichever one you chose, I guess, for the paper magazine.
They will, and let me just throw this in so there's no confusion. One of my interviews with Howard Mickle, perhaps the last one, where he described this On the Air magazine, it will be a little bit unlike QST, which, other than the pro forma stuff, doesn't have the same content every month. The On the Air magazine will tend to have an evolving content, so it will continue to have some of the basic things in it and I don't know if it'll be every month, but I don't want to misspeak, bi-monthly. I think every other month is what the news story says. So it will be an evolving magazine that would be probably good for newcomers. So it will be slightly different than QST, but you're absolutely right. A choice in print, I believe you'll be able to get both of them in digital.
And something for the UK listeners, or for the UK members on this call as well. How many of you know about the new RSGB magazines that are digital only?
Yeah, they come out for members only, though, don't they?
Well, as the ARRL ones will be as well.
Yeah.
Well, I will say, as an RSGB member, they probably could make it a little easier to access, but I know they've been kind of revising their website. I don't mean that to be a big stone, but I enjoy being a member of the RSGB and have for a number of years. And so they do a good job.
Yeah, I'm also a member of RSGB, despite the fact I live in Germany. Radcom Basics and Radcom Plus are two new magazines, online magazines that the RSGB introduced probably a year ago. But again, publicity, you hear a bit about them occasionally, and I'm on the list, so I get notified when they come out. But, it's how on earth do organizations within our hobby advertise better to get more people to know about what they're doing? And I think that's a general problem. The RSGB, the ARRL, I'm sure WIA and people as well, they also had some additions at one point that nobody knew about. So how on earth, it's marketing.
Yeah.
It's marketing that they can't do.
Well, the other problem, Ed, and I'm going to bring Chris in because he's sitting very quietly and patiently, but I'll bring you in a second, Chris. One last thing I'm going to say on this is when you get an email I might get the email from the RSGB telling me that these new magazines have come out, but if you're getting 200, 300, 400 emails a day, as not uncommon for people, they get lost in the works. And if they've gone to the spam by any reason, that's another one. So I don't know what the answer is for publicising this stuff. Sending emails out, yeah, but if you've got, say, 400 emails a day coming in, by the time you've waded through and found it, it might be a few weeks. Anyway.
Yeah, well, that's Martin. That's what email filters in your email client are for.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
But you've got to set that up. It's not something, it's extra work for you before you can filter them out.
Yeah, but
which isn't a good marketing ploy from the other side either.
No, and since
giving your readers more work,
and since half the people don't know how to do a lot of this stuff that we're in this hobby, it's a bit of a problem. Chris, what's your thoughts?
So I think you covered a lot of that, a lot of the subject. I think you mentioned about the fact that some folks haven't even heard of podcasts. I think two things have driven podcasts. One is the smartphone. So I think, a lot of folks, I don't know what the proportion of people are, but a lot of people now got either an iPhone or an Android device, and podcasts are very easy to do on those. I think the iPod, before those devices came out, maybe, but I think what's really driven the explosion in podcasts is the fact that people have got smartphones, and smartphones are really easy to install some software and subscribe to podcasts. So for folks that haven't got a smartphone, they may never no idea what a podcast is, how that works. There are other ways to get podcasts, but that's the easiest way. The other thing is, certainly from my experience, when I listen to podcasts, I'm traveling, I'm in the car, on train,
right?
Where you sat around, you're a captive audience, and you've either got the radio or you can listen to a podcast. So and I've only got so much time, so many hours a week where I'm in that situation. So I've got a library of podcasts that I listen to, and obviously I've got to choose. I've got a whole spectrum of podcasts that I can choose from, and I choose the ones that interest me. So, the AAØI, I've tried it. Obviously, they've perhaps found that what they've tried so far hasn't worked particularly well, so they're trying something else. So, that's what you do. You sort of try things out, don't you? So, they want to tweak it a bit or change it, and then, that's what they've got to do. Why not? There's no point just continuing to do the same old thing if it doesn't work. So, that's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, well, I think we've covered that one, and whatever the ARRL does, I wish them success. In all honesty, and I hope you manage to get it sorted and get a good product out. But that covers our news stories for today, and we've gone a bit long. I'm just going to pop round the group now and find out what you guys have been up to since the last time we had a chat. Ed, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I've actually had the soldering iron quite often on and hot, heated up in the last month. with some construction stuff. I've been working on a portable HF amplifier. I've assembled a speech compressor kit, and I've got a 2-meter transverter kit sat in front of me waiting to be started on. So, I haven't been doing a lot of construction all year, and this last month, all of a sudden, I'm starting doing, actually soldering components on boards and the like. And of course, I've had a couple of SOTA activations as usual, and I'm planning a couple of new wire antennas to try and improve my performance from the mountaintops. And that's about it.
That's a fair amount, Ed. It's a fair amount. You've been fairly busy, probably busier than me. Frank, what have you been up to?
Well, I've built a 6-meter dipole for some portable work. We've got a team in my club. We're going to do that. And I built some little T-connectors that some of the whips that you can buy from Buddy Pole or MFJ and kind of just screw into those 3/4-inch bolts. Got a half dozen of those built. Been working with Rob Sherwood on extending his receive tables by adding data on the price of the rig and the consumer satisfaction out of EHAM, actually analyzing those data today. Can price by performance or satisfaction. So we'll probably have a paper that will come out of that. Also been keeping up with our boy Hans Summers. He exploded a power amp transistor here a few weeks ago and was using his new Siglent oscilloscope to help figure out why. He got that figured out. Now he has a new power amp that goes with the QCX CW rig that he's been selling, and it's now available. So I've been doing a little promotional work with him and then some for a symposium over in St. Louis. So a little bit of work. I'm envious of Ed with melting and solder. I've got a couple of things I need to get into, but I am glad to get those 6-meter antennas put together.
Yeah, that's good. And I saw it that Hans had blown the top off a transistor, which was interesting. And Hans is a good guy, and he does well. Bill, what have you been up to?
Aside from Skype crashing on me, I've been listening to a lot of Pactor signals with that PMON program. That's what I've been spending most of the month on. Did work a couple DX stations on 17 meters with the FT8. And apparently I've been hitting, according to my logbook, I've been hitting 60 meters FT8 pretty hard. I did, a couple hours before the call, I actually did work Bill an E4RD on 15 meters FT8. Wow. Yeah. I saw him on the cluster and I'm like, ooh, I should go, turn on the flex and see if I can hear him. And I could. So I now have an E4RD in the logbook. For anyone that doesn't know, that's the Bill from one of the 3 presenters from Linux in the Ham Shack, another podcast that I enjoy. So getting ready for the holidays, so I got a whole bunch of stuff to do with that, and as everyone else I'm sure does. And that's about it on my end.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you have good fun, and let's say going from there. I will leave you to last, Chris, because we often do things a lot together. Mr. Rothwell, Martin.
Hello.
What have you been up to? You been playing with your toys recently?
I wish. I've had a bit of play with D-Star this morning. I've been off today. I've been playing with D-Star, also quite a lot of Fusion, of course. I use Zello most mornings on my way into work. I actually had a play with HF today. I had a tune round and heard somebody in the States, I don't know whereabouts, I forget now, but I just heard him on the end of a conversation talking to somebody somewhere in Europe. The guy in Europe was plus 60 with me. That's with the preamp off. The guy in the States was a proper 5.9 signal with me. But I said hello, exchange pleasantries and things, so that was nice. So the bands do work. You just have to try with it. But other than that, so we mentioned at the start of the program, I had to do some work on XP's internet server that died. Had a dead CMOS battery, so after a bit of around with that, I got that to work. But other than that, that's pretty much it, really, because been a bit busy with work the last few weeks.
Yeah, sounds like you've been busy, mate. Well, we will catch up with you, as I say, going forward. Chris, you've done very similar things to me, but what have you been up to?
Well, been up to be honest, not a lot. I'm trying to think if I've been on the podcast since we did the Cat's Bazaar. I think you have, Martin. I don't think I have. So that was quite good, actually. I was pretty busy. Talked to a lot of people. I know, Martin, you were there with your orange. In fact, was I there with my orange shirt? I think I was. I was wearing now. So I think I think that was interesting, and spoke to a lot of people, and that was a good day. I've not done an awful lot of radio. I've been on holiday since the last recording, so I was away for a week, and I've been pretty busy with work. So I've not done an awful lot of actual radio. Things that are coming up, well, we're on HMS Belfast at the weekend, so that's the usual fun. It's obviously now holiday season. I'm going to be here, there, and everywhere for the next few weeks, so I'm not sure if I can get much of a chance to actually operate. One thing that I really must start on, and this links back into what Frank was saying, I really must start on my QCX kit that I bought in Dayton. It's still sat in the bag. So maybe that's something I can look at maybe over the holiday period. I've got a few days off, so maybe that's something I can get out of the bag and start to work on. So, but no, not a huge amount, I'm afraid, from me, Martin.
Right. Well, as you say, we're going to be on the Belfast this Saturday. It's our last one of the year. We're hoping to get on a few more times, but as I say, it hasn't happened. I managed to catch up with Ed, WX2R, from the Fairlawn Amateur Radio Society in London a couple of weeks ago. He's a podcast listener. He was over and he said, would I like to meet up? I've met him a couple of times. Ed and I had a couple of coffees, which was quite dangerous for me, 2 coffees, isn't it, Chris? But we managed to put the world to rights.
A little bit dangerous, Martin, yes.
Yeah. But it was good. It was good fun. Ed and I had a really good chat. I also I've been on granddad duties, so I've been to Ireland looking after my grandchildren while Colin disappeared to New York shopping with his XYL. So that happened. Unfortunately for me, I took out a half-size G5 RV, which I'd never used before, and I put it on the pole, and in truthfulness, it was about as useful as an ashtray on a motorcycle. It just wouldn't load up. It really would not load up. But the only band it would almost load up on with the built-in ATU was 6 meters, and there wasn't a lot happening there. So did do a reasonable amount of calling and a few contacts on VHF and UHF. So it wasn't a total disaster, and I managed to sort Colin's shack out and make him a power supply for his network radio. So you might actually hear him on Zello mine when he's about.
He's at network radio. I didn't realise he had I knew he bought one and had issues with it and sent it back. I didn't know he got another one.
No, he didn't send it back. He couldn't send it back because he couldn't find the way he paid for it, so they couldn't give him a refund.
Right, okay.
So, anyway. And apart from that, I've been computer fixing, which is not really radio, but done a few fixes for Mrs. B. And I decided to bite the bullet with the laptop that Carol bought me some time ago. She bought me this nice laptop, which didn't perform very well. So I've doubled its memory and I've put a solid-state hard drive in it now. The bottleneck's now the processor, whereas it used to be the hard disk and memory. So, but anyway, that's done.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, it's working quite well, actually. So anyway, that's what I've been up to. Not very much radio, I'm afraid. Right, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me tonight. I'd like to thank Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH.
Cheers, Martin. Thank you once again.
Yeah, and I'm sure I'll see you at the weekend and we'll have fun. Mr. Rothwell, Martin Rothwell, M0SGL.
Great to be back.
Yeah, don't be shy. I'll catch you on Zello at some point in time.
Not trying to be shy. It's my computer's just shy, but hopefully the new one's going to continue to work okay for me.
Hopefully it will. Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH. Good to chat to you again, Frank.
Same here. Good to be here, and Merry Christmas to all our listeners. I think this will be the last podcast that I'll be on before then. So
it's our last podcast before Christmas, so the next group are probably going to have to move the record day because I think it's New Year's Day. So I don't think anybody will be around. I'd also like to thank Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP. Thanks, Ed.
Yeah, he beat me to it. I was just going to say Merry Christmas to all the listeners, or Merry Celebration, whatever your religion is that celebrates in December. Enjoy, but be safe.
Yeah. And Mr. Bill Barnes, whose children are on the naughty list. Thanks for joining.
Yes, they are.
So nothing for Christmas for them then, Bill.
I don't know what we're going to do yet. We're still just having discussion.
Yeah.
Oh, piece of coal.
Yeah.
I have a bucket of coal all ready to go with a bow on it, and she doesn't think I'm very funny.
No, I favour electrocution, Bill. It doesn't show any marks.
I don't want to go there, but thank you very much for having me on the show, and Happy New Year. One thing that I don't know if anyone else is going to mention here is 2020, so we're rolling into a new decade. So
we certainly are. We certainly are, Bill. Listen, I'd like to thank each and every one of you and wish you all a Happy New Year, or Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and also a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to all our listeners. And if you celebrate something other than Christmas, then substitute that for Christmas. But have a good one. Thanks for being listeners, and I hope you've enjoyed our content again this year. 73 all. And we'll
73.
Yeah.
73, have a good one.
73.
And we'll carry on with the podcast.
For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Now it's time to have a look at the Newseum Briefing with me, Colin M6BOY. We start with news here in Hungary, where they're halfway through their year-long tests at 26 megahertz, which will be continuing through to the end of May 2020. Content is being transmitted on a 24-hour program, played out on a loop, compiled by a media partner of the project, Radio Marina. What is unusual about the test is it's being carried out on 26.060 megahertz with 100 watts into a 5/8 vertical. Reception reports so far have been received as far away as the Netherlands. So if you come across this transmission by the Budapest University of Technology, they'd love to hear how far across Europe they're spreading. In France, the 70th anniversary of the first amateur radio contacts with some of their outlying territories is being celebrated. There's a special event call sign going to be available between the 12th and the 26th of January. The special event call sign is Tango Mike 70 Tango Alpha Alpha Foxtrot, and it's been activated by radio amateur Francois Foxtrot 8 Delta Victor Delta. The call sign commemorates the 70th anniversary of the first amateur radio contacts with the French Southern and Austral territories, and they took place in January 1950 during the building of scientific research stations on St. Paul and Amsterdam Island, and on Kerlingen Island, and also on Adel Land in the Antarctica. We'll put information on this on the ICQ podcast.com website, and you can check out that information from there. As we wrap up 2019, there's a new record in Australia on the 70 SEMS. The digital record is being extended to 2,806 kilometres in a contact between Lee, VK2 Kilo Romeo Romeo, and Peter, VK6 Kilo X-Ray Whiskey. They say got that distance. They crossed over the Great Australian Bight, part of the ocean well noted for transferotic ducting. That's a mouthful there. New record was achieved using digital contact on 432 megahertz, as both stations were using FT8 mode. So congratulations there to Lee and Peter for their contact. Well, now we head on to our features episode, a feature on low band VHF. As always, guys, hope you enjoy.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Hi guys, for this episode's podcast feature, I thought I'd have a look at low band VHF. Now, before you guys instantly turn off if you don't live in Europe, please have a listen, because there might be some things you may be able to use on other devices, or when you get the particular band. Now, low band VHF is a term that's often used in the UK to refer to PMR radios, taxis, minicabs, that sort of thing, radios, which operate between 66 and 88 megs. So what I'm actually going to talk more about is the 4 meter band, although sometimes some of these radios can be converted down to 6 meters. I don't think that's potentially these days worth doing because there are so many rigs around with 6 meters on anyway. Now, a quick look at the 4-meter radios. Why would you want to have one? Well, in the UK, there's a lot going on. It's a different band, and we are about experimenting and playing with new modes and bits and pieces. The 4-meter band is one that Marty Rothwell, M0SGL, and myself play on quite a bit, and we find it very enjoyable. Now, looking at it, it's not sort of a new band. It's been around in Europe for years. It's set up properly. It has a band plan, and certainly in the UK, if I was looking at the band plan for the UK, between 70 and 70.1 megahertz, we've got propagation beacons, 70.1 to 70.250. We have narrowband modes, which is suggested, LRCW, SSB, etc. And above that, from 70.25 to 70.294, which is quite a strange number, is all modes. And above 70.294 to 70.500 is channelized. It's all modes and it's channelized. Now, they channelize them in 12.5K steps in the UK for FM, and that works particularly well. However, if you're from a different country other than the UK, please check your own band plan, because you may have a different calling frequency. In the UK, the calling frequency is often accepted as 70.450. So 450 megahertz. So, please check your calling frequency. You may still be able to talk to a UK amateur, or a UK amateur may also talk to you, but please check your band plan so that it gives you the greater opportunity. Now, reason I've kind of gone and looked at 4 meters yet again is there are now coming available more and more rigs that are doing 4 meters as standard. Now, in fairness, I used to own an FT847 and regret letting it go, but that did 4 meters straight out the box. Not very well initially, but there was a mod that would improve it. So, as I say, if you've got an 847, you may very well be able to do that mod to improve the transmitting power, because it was a fairly low output power on 4 meters, but with a couple of small changes you can make it quite reasonable. Now, obviously, recently with the ICOM 7300, that's opened up the 4 meters, certainly within Europe, and it's certainly given the opportunities to get on the air. Now, that's obviously a multi-mode radio, certainly as the FT847 was. And the Yaesu, the new Yaesu FT101D, also has 4 meters on it. So there's a lot of activity about to start on 4 meters. And I'm sure if we make a big noise of it, even you guys in the States who don't have 4 meters, it's about time somebody petitioned again. I know the FCC's turned you down once, but if we keep asking, they may just get fed up and give it to you guys. So it could be worth a go. Now, I today don't own any multi-mode 4 meter rigs, although I own probably too many rigs for 4 meters, and they can be picked up at quite silly money, quite honestly. I own 2 Ascom SE550s. I bought them about 15, 16 years ago when I was fairly new to the hobby, and they work very, very well. Let's be honest, they work very, very well, but they are converted mobile utility radios, and unfortunately, the utility radio people, or taxis or whatever, are not expecting you to rag chew. So Although they don't have fans on them, they have a reasonable heatsink, but they do get very warm if you transmit for long periods. But in fairness, they work very, very, very well, and I was quite pleased with them. A couple of years ago, I managed to pick up a Key radio, which is another PMR rig, Key 3000. And once again, that particular one is 16 channels only, which gives you the top end where the VHF is. The ASCOMs, I've got ROMs in those that will do 66 to 88 megs and go on 12.5K spacing anywhere within there. Although I do have to obey my licensing conditions, obviously. Now, started doing more on 4 meters in the UK and decided to get a radio that once again had got this time's got a proper VFO and all the nice things, and I could set it up better how I wanted it. And I ended up with an Anytone AT558. Now the Anytone AT558 looks exactly the same as an amateur radio and is configured as such. The other thing is, though, that you can, if you were going to use it in a commercial environment, if you had a license down there, you can program it initially so that it acts as a utility radio and you don't have access to changing the frequency other than what's programmed into the rig. But the reason I like it is because it doesn't get red hot if you transmit for a reasonable amount of time. So it was designed as much for amateur as for utility use. Now, antennas. Well, because the band's not high frequency effectively, you don't have to have massive antennas. Most of the time, I end up, if I'm mobile, using an antenna I made, a quarter wave for the car. This consists of a quarter wave length of rod soldered into a PL259. So I soldered the rod into a PL259. Once it's soldered in, to stop it at the base shorting out, I then run some epoxy resin in to the end to hold it away from shorting out. And that works extremely well on top of the car on a standard mag mount. It's cut to length, so that works very well. Other antennas around, well, there are commercial 4-meter antennas if you really want to spend the money, but the one I made was probably less than £5 anyway, well, more like a couple of pounds. But there are commercial 4-meter antennas for people who want to buy them already made. Dipoles are not that hard to make, and you got to realise that each leg is going to be no more than 1 metre long. In fact, it'll be shorter than 1 metre. So each leg of your dipole is going to be shorter. If you put it up, obviously you can put it up vertically if you want to just do FM at home. And there are, as I say, quite a few published antennas available on the internet for you to build if you want to do something more elaborate. Now, contacts on 4 meters. Why do I like it? Well, the contacts. Usually, if you get a contact on 4 meters, the 4-meter contact is not just 5.9, thank you very much, go away. It's usually a rag chew. Because it's such a quiet band, and there aren't hundreds of people on it like some of the other bands, let's be honest about it. But you have a contact with somebody, they'll probably want to talk to you for half an hour. So if you're a rag chewer, this is an ideal band for you. So contacts I enjoy on 4 meters. Now there is a 4-meter group in the UK and they have a website. Unfortunately, it appears to be down at the moment. It's just showing text. It wants you to log in. I'm sure the guy's got a fault on his website, but it'll be fixed fairly soon, I'm sure. You'll find that at www.70mhz.org. That's www.70mhz.org. And last time I looked at it some time ago, there was lots of very useful information. And at the moment, it appears to be down, so hopefully it's being fixed. One other thing, if you're in the UK, very useful. You can't have repeaters on the 4-meter band. Well, I'm not saying you can't have them, but the biggest problem you've got is because you've only got half a mega bandwidth, you effectively have not got enough spacing between frequencies. So there is an option. In the UK, there's a thing called the Tring Parrot. The Tring Parrot is obviously based in a place called Tring, which is just north of London. It is an interesting box. You transmit into it, it listens to you, and then it retransmits your over. And then the other person transmits in, and then it retransmits their over. Now, in fairness, 2 things. Don't go in for long overs on it, because the person at the other end will probably think you've disappeared and gone home and changed channel. So make sure your overs are fairly short. And in fairness, if you do a long over, it's pretty boring listening to your own voice a second time to hear what you said. However, it's a great device for checking that your rig is working properly. It's an FM transmit parrot, and its call sign is GB7 FM. I said we couldn't do repeaters on 4 meters, but, and I'm just throwing this one out as an idea, why can't we do crossband repeaters? So for argument's sake, we're not allowed to transmit out of our own bands, but if we transmitted in bands, and as I say, a lot of these rigs do quite a lot of separation. You know, if you go from 66 to 88 megs and you're only using a little bit of 70 meg, there are commercial receivers and transmitters and bits and pieces. If somebody was to license a commercial device, then you could transmit in amateur and receive on the PMR frequency, effectively doing split exactly the same as we do when we do satellites or on HF when you do split. So there is an opportunity for somebody at some point in time to, the receive frequency would be outside the amateur bands, but still possible to do, I would suggest. Anyway, I just thought I'd run some of these ideas by you. The 4-meter band, love it to bits. For my colleagues in the States, terribly sorry you haven't got it, but it's about time you badgered the FCC to see if you can get it again. I'd like to thank you for listening and hope this was of interest.
Hi, Mrs. B here. The guys thank you very much for your downloads. However, there are a few things that would help the ICQ podcast to continue to grow. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We need you, and it's free. 73's Mrs. B.
Well, thanks, Ed, there for your feature there on low band VHF. And to think now 314 episodes of wonderful features, but our final one of 2019. So congratulations there on your final feature for the year, Dad. Don't know where you put them out of.
No, neither do I, son, but it happens. No, in fairness, we've done quite a few this year. I think we normally say we'll do 26 episodes a year, and I think we've done well over 30. I think it's around about 32 last time I looked, but don't hold me as gospel on that one, Colin.
No, exactly. And all those shows being advert-free would not have been possible without our donors. So as the end of the year, we'd like to obviously thank all the donors this year throughout 2019. All the guys who have set up monthly and annual subscription donors. They're fantastically way to help us pay away all our costs for the show. And, of course, this episode's one-off donors, Scott McDonald, Kilo Alpha 9 Papa, Richard Drexel, Kilo 4 Romeo Juliet Delta, and Bill Seward, Whiskey 4 Echo X-Ray Tango. Bill H. Chapter, an annual subscription donor. Guys, you have no idea how much your value that you find in the show and the value you sent our way and how greatly appreciate that is. So thank you very much for that there. We'd like to encourage you to consider sending whatever you think you value the show to us to help us keep us advert free and keep us paying our way. by visiting icqpodcast.com/donate. Well, as I say, there's some options there for subscription plans, or as I say, a one-off donation just to show your value for the show. I say it'd be greatly appreciated. Say, helps us continue to pay our costs and continues our mantra of keeping the show advert free. Now, if the harmonics have got everything built by Christmas Day, or if just like me, your job is just to keep the Wi-Fi running for whatever new shiny gadget comes in from China, and you're a bit bored because of the year, check out our YouTube videos if you've not checked it this year at youtube.com/ICQ podcast. As I say, there's a collection of stuff from some of the events we've been at this year, so you're more than welcome to check out those videos from there. You might want to keep update with the latest news information from the ICQ podcast. You can do that by subscribing to our newsletter at icqpodcast.com. Or as I say, our Twitter feeds is always available at Colin Butler and at M1MRB to catch us there. We'd like to thank our contributors to the News Roundtable in this episode. Chris, Mike 0, Tango Charlie Hotel. Martin, Mike 0, Sierra Golf Lima. Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel. Ed, DD5, Lima Papa. And Bill, November 3, Juliet India X-Ray. I say for kindly donating their time and taking part in the show. Thank you very much for doing that for us from there. And we probably mentioned this a couple of times this episode, guys, but I say your downloads this year and meeting you at various shows and events, etc. this year has been very humbling and very warming. So we'd like to ask you to kindly consider to keep going next year. And say if you catch us at events, etc., wearing our wonderful orange T-shirts, always feel free to say hello and hi and let us know what you enjoy about the show and what you're passionate about with the hobby. It's always great to hear. Well, I think that just about wraps things up, Dad. I say before I send you off to make Mrs. B a cup of tea and find a chocolate biscuit, and more importantly, make sure a present's under the tree there for Christmas next week. I just thought I'd just check in and see is there anything else we need to cover off before as I send you off to make Mum a cup of tea.
Yeah, just one or two things, Colin. Her present's under the tree, so she's okay. We'll be okay when she comes home and when we get to Christmas Day. But what I'd also like to say is I'm going to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year from all of the presenters, because in fairness, we have great fun producing these. Your feedback is great to us. It's great talking to your shows or whatever. And equally, if we can spare the time, because we're all fairly busy, and I don't mean that nastily, we won't ignore you. But I mean, I met up with Ed earlier in the month in London for a quick coffee. So, if we're around, we quite happily come and say hi and go from there. So please keep in contact. We are interested in what you're doing. And let me wish you all long DX next year. Happy New Year, long DX, and may you get some good radio stuff for Christmas.
Exactly, and I can echo that. So happy Christmas, happy holidays, and happy Hanukkah. Or I say, if you're not religious or celebrating anyway, guys, I hope you get the opportunity to take some time off and say enjoy the hobby. So 73 is all, and we'll do it all again next year. See you all then, guys. 73.
73.